This is a story about friendship, about love, about passion, about near death, about betrayal, but also about forgiveness. It's the story of England's best band of the 2000s, the Libertines. In 2003, Pete Doherty was sent to jail for breaking into his bandmates and friends Carl Barrett's apartment. Peter is the guy that looks like he's ready for his next fix on the right in this picture. Carl is the slightly less high-looking guy on the left. More on the circumstances of this picture in a little while. Apparently, the break-in was an act of revenge for being kicked out of the band due to his drug addiction that was getting out of control. Rock and roll, baby. It wouldn't have been surprising if he had pawned the stuff that he stole off to get more money for drugs. Because at the time, few things Pete did were surprising. You would think that was the end of the band and Pete's and Carl's friendship. But Carl forgave Pete. The following year, the Libertines returned with their second and for a long time last album and went all the way to #1 in the UK album charts. Today, I'll tell the story of how we came to all of that and what happened next. We run a record store, 22 Sound in Mandeville, Louisiana. And clearly, only people madly in love with music are crazy and maybe stupid enough to do such a thing. We love talking about music, so if you love hearing the stories behind the music and stay up to date with new releases, subscribe to our channel. If you're in the New Orleans area, we'd love to welcome you at our store here. And if you're a bit too far away, no problem. You can still shop our store online at 22soundrecords.com. The link is in the description. And you can support an independent, family-owned record store. Alright, back to our story. The Libertines were formed in 1997, the year that saw the first signs of the impending decline of Britpop mania. It was the year that Tony Blair got elected Prime Minister of the UK, ending an 18-year reign of the Conservative Party. Blair was smart enough to align himself with the Britpop stars of the moment and portray himself as the candidate of the youth. Noel Gallagher of Oasis, he seemed just as happy to align himself with Blair as vice versa. He certainly loved the attention. He was now even more than the rock star he always wanted to be. He was a political force. The picture of Noel sipping some champagne with Tony Blair at the Labour Party's victory celebration ended up being a symbol for the beginning of the end of Britpop. As is often the case, once the establishment embraces and sucks the life out of a youth movement, the end is usually near. 1997 is also the year Oasis released Be Here Now, another nail in the Britpop coffin. It was the follow-up to their 1995 album What's the Story Morning Glory that transformed them from British to global superstars. You might have heard Wonderwall before, maybe. Be Here Now is what happens when rock stars can do whatever they please, including ridiculous amounts of cocaine. In short, the songs get unnecessarily long. 1997 is also the year that Blur became known in America as the band with the Woohoo song, a tune that is now mostly played in hockey arenas. I'm cool with that. I never liked Blur anyway. The Libertines definitely had some things in common with Oasis. The music was gritty and dirty, but also at times simply beautiful. Hooligans with a softcore. They both liked to party hard, really hard. And both bands technically had 4 members, but really, to be honest, only 2 of them mattered. For Oasis, it was the Gallagher brothers. For the Libertines, it was Pete and Carl. They shared guitar, vocals, and songwriting duties, and had a, let's say, complicated relationship. They bonded over their love for music and art. They created a shared mythology of the good ship they called Albion, which is sailing to Arcadia, their idea of an idolized England, or something like that. Not everything needs to make sense when you're young and wild and ready to take on the world. They were romantics, and that's one of the things people, including me, loved about them. The first few years after their formation, they played mainly on a local level. A lot of shows in their own apartment that they called the Albion Room, often accompanied by the police. I guess their neighbors weren't their biggest fans. Those shows would become part of their legend building though. Mainstream rock at the time was dominated by bands like Creed, or for the little more aggressive bros, Limp Bizkit. But then in 2001, the world of rock music changed. The Strokes released Is This It and became the hippest band in the world, practically overnight. England needed an answer, and Rough Trade founded in 2002, the Libertines released their debut album Up the Bracket. It was a revelation. Invoking English legends such as the Kings or the Clash, it was retro, but it still sounded fresh and untamed. Both Pete and Carl wrote wonderful, at times off-kilter, yet catchy melodies, and their shared love for poetry shines through in their lyrics, giving them an artsy aura without losing the street. When Pete was 16, he won a poetry competition at his school and embarked on a tour of Russia organized by the British Council. He was once a really good boy. While the Strokes were so damn cool that they almost seemed apathetic, the Libertines were wildly passionate. There was a sense of adventure surrounding them. They felt dangerous, just like rock bands should. Even though they were heavily influenced by the past, this was a band for the youth. Garage rock was all the rage now, and it became pretty much mandatory for new bands to use the definite article in their band name. It should have been great times for the boys in the bands, but Pete's drug use started to get out of control. It's a classic rock and roll story. He became unreliable to a point that Carl kicked him out of the band. That's when Pete sought revenge and broke into Carl's apartment. Well, instead of that being the final nail in the coffin of the band though, it marked the beginning of their reunion. Carl has a sense for theatrics, so of course he didn't just forgive Pete quietly. No, he staged it. As Pete was released from jail, he was waiting for him at the prison gates, along with countless journalists, and arm in arm, they went back to freedom. This is when the photo was taken that ended up being the cover of their next album. That night, they played an intimate, spontaneous gig to celebrate, just like in the good old days. Shortly afterwards, they went back in the studio to create the follow-up to Up the Bracket and hired none other than Mick Jones of The Clash to produce it. Sonically, it showed a wider array of influences while maintaining their core sound. The album felt urgent, immediate. The songs were basically recorded as they were written. It sounded like a band on the verge of falling to pieces, but somehow pulling it together, making it to the end of the record without passing out. Probably because that's exactly what they actually were. Many of the lyrics were about Pete and Carl's complicated relationship, most notably the album opener, Can't Stand Me Now, and closer, What Became of the Likely Lads. Also the two best songs on the album, the perfect bookends. Pete and Carl sing in direct response to each other, like bickering lovers, a drama of tumultuous love turned into song. The album starts with Carl singing, an ending fitting for the start, You twist and tore our love apart, and ends with both of them asking, what became of the dreams we had? What became of forever? We'll never know. In America, that would probably be called a bromance, but that term just wouldn't capture the grandiosity on display here. This must have been love. The album was actually a great success. It went to #1 in the UK charts. Despite all the chaos, they had managed to get even bigger, but the fragile harmony wouldn't last long. Before the year was over, they broke up again. What followed was the public downfall of a young rock star who had the world at his feet, but seemed to be throwing it all away. In 2005, the Daily Mirror, one of the UK's most famous, or better, infamous, tabloid newspapers, ran a cover story with a big photo of supermodel Kate Moss snorting cocaine. I remember my first reaction at the time was, is this news? I just assumed she and all of her model friends would be on coke. I mean, how else could they be that skinny? Anyway, that's besides the point. The photos were taken at a recording studio where Pete's new band, the Baby Shambles, were working on their first album. Pete was now dating Kate Moss, and the UK tabloid press loved it. The Beauty and the Beast. Pete became more famous for this relationship and for his drug antics than for his music. Scandal followed scandal. For a while, it seemed like we were watching a young musician die in public, much like Amy Winehouse sadly did a little bit later. Miraculously, he still managed to put out really great music during that time. The first two Baby Shambles albums at times rivaled the brilliance of the Libertines output. Cole still made music as well, but the spotlight wasn't as bright anymore. The two Likely Lads seemed worlds apart in the late 2000s, but this drama actually has a happy ending. In 2010, they celebrated their big reunion. First just for live shows, but in 2015 they actually released a new album. It was really well received by fans and critics, and the record proved that they were more than their own mythology and theatrics. They were actually an amazing rock band, one that brought a sense of adventure and danger back into rock music. And somehow, they survived it all. What do you think about the Libertines? Why weren't they bigger in the US? Or do you think they were actually overrated? We would love to hear your opinions about it. And we would love to have you as a subscriber to our channel. Alright, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Put in the comments your opinion about the Libertines. And hey, if you need some records, order them at 22 Sound. 22soundrecords.com. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I see you all around.